Ed Commission, the Subcommittee on Communication and Engagement. Can I, actually, why don't I have folks from the subcommittee? We'll do roll call. So I'm Megan Roy. I'm on this subcommittee and I'm the chair of the commission. Jeff Fannin, you're the first one on my screen.
Good morning, Jeff Fannin from Vermont NEA. Thanks.
Thanks. And John Castle.
Yep. Good morning, John Castle, Executive Director for the Vermont Rural Education Collaborative.
Thanks. Jay?
Jay Nichols, Executive Director, Vermont Principals Association.
Thank you. Oliver Olson is also on this committee. I believe he'll join us. And then we do have, Zoe, you can introduce yourself, even though you're technically a guest on the committee.
Hi, good morning. Zoe Saunders, Interim Secretary of Education.
Great, thanks. Can I start with a motion to approve the minutes from our last meeting? Thanks, Jeff. A second. Thanks, Jay. Any discussion or edits that folks need? I didn't catch any either. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thanks. Just a reminder to folks joining us to keep yourself muted. We had a little bit of an echo there. Thank you. All right. I'm going to move us into public comment. Folks from the public, is there anyone who would like to address the committee before we get started? And you can unmute or raise your hand if you would like. Okay. Oh, John Clifford, go ahead.
Seem to be muted, John.
Okay,
There you
can
go.
you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes, we can.
I'd just like to comment briefly without hopefully getting cut off, that I feel this committee or communication is one of the key elements of your study commission, based really on last year's lack of communication strategy from our local school board. And I know it's been said by some of your members that what is happening at the local level is not your immediate concern, but I think it should be. After all, what is more important fundamentally in what you're doing than making it more efficient at the local level? Communication was never much of a priority by our local board, although it's written into their policies that effective communication is a important component. It's even on the Vermont School Board Association's website. If you look under communication, they had a fairly detailed plan for the boards to follow. In fact, using different formats like the forum and so forth. And none of that was really done to any effective degree to the taxpayers of our community. And one of the reasons I started posting long posts on our forum was to help educate our taxpayers on how to blacken in those ovals on voting day for yes or no, depending on what that was going to ultimately do to their taxes and spending. So I would encourage you to continue to work diligently on this process, and please include some sort of norms for these boards to follow in terms of better educating the public on what these spending measures mean. And I know under the new Act 183, that there was the revised budget language, I believe, went through that tried to add a little more information in terms of percent increases from year to year, but it's really not enough. So thank you for my time.
Thank you, John. Okay. I don't see, okay, I see one more hand, so we'll take one more comment and then we will have an opportunity at the end of the meeting as well. Mary.
Thank you, Megan, and good morning, everyone. And I'll be quick because I know your time is limited. Again, thinking also about what the prior, what John said regarding the importance of this subcommittee. And a couple of you have heard me chime in on this, but I said I would be a squeaky wheel. I think this is also a great opportunity to really think about the folks in the community who you bring to the conversation. And as I have expressed, I have been deeply concerned about the lack of a diverse demographic across the commission and across the subcommittees. I think it's a real opportunity in this committee to think about where the partnering organizations might be, where you could connect and make sure that you're bringing in voices of folks who are not being represented on the commission. So thank you for your work. Just wanted to, again, mention the importance of the diverse demographic.
Thank you, Mary. Okay. Give another minute. All right. I did not ask committee members. Does anyone have any amendments to the agenda before we jump in? Okay, I think we're good. So I'm gonna kick us off. The first thing that we wanted to talk about, and especially do this while Zoe is here, is to talk about the communication and engagement consultant. So at last week's full commission meeting, the commission did adopt the recommendation of this committee to secure a consultant to help with, frankly, what both of the public commenters this morning have shared and others, so that we can get this engagement part right. And so the commission did not have much discussion on kind of the draft concepts we had floated in an RFP, mostly because I think Zoe, it would help to hear from you about what the agency's process is, what we should do to inform it, and so I'll let you start.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I do want to flag that I'll need to jump off this call at 8:25, so appreciate being able to be a part of the beginning of the agenda. I've also asked Shelley Matz from our team, who is our procurement specialist, to walk through any questions you might have regarding the timeline. More of the nature of my questions are getting at some of the specificity that we'll need to include in the scope of work. So from my view, I think the most important next step is getting very concrete on what you hope for the consultant to be able to achieve. So I know in the work on the commission, we did review kind of a high-level overview of that scope of work, and I think this is an opportunity for me to understand a little bit more specifics and details around how you want the consultant to engage. And so when you think about how, it's really beginning to define, how many forums are you expecting the participant to facilitate, what are those focus groups look like, kind of the scope of those regional engagements. And then I think it is important to think about what you're looking to present and information that you want to gather. So in the commission, there's a distinction made between expertise around facilitating engagement versus expertise bringing forward really information to support informed input and anything you want the community to react to. So I do think it's important, while a lot, you could structure this so that you would organize the communication consultant to coordinate with those subject matter experts to make sure that we're clear on what information to bring in. But I think it's really important to be intentional around what you hope to share and what you hope to gather through this community engagement, so that we can clearly articulate the expectation for how the consultant will engage with subject matter experts, both within the state, but agencies, but also in the field. And I think it's really important that we are a little bit more concrete in spelling that out, so that you get bids that are really aligned with what you hope to achieve. So my hope in kind of joining you for this part of the conversation is to get a little bit more specificity on how you would like this work to move forward.
Yeah, I can kick us off and then kind of open it up to the committee. I think what I would say, and this is outlined in the draft that the commission saw, the challenge with specificity is, I think this committee, it feels pretty strongly that we need the expertise of a consultant to actually go back through even the framework that we've developed, because we have an understanding that at a really high level, we want input sessions facilitated. We can recommend a number. I'll use that as an example, actually. We know that we have to have a meeting in each county, and that we think it's a good idea that every time we have a meeting, there is an opportunity for input. And we also know that we want some sort of input opportunity. We used the term survey for those who can't attend those. We also need this engagement consultant, ideally someone with an equity lens, kind of picking up the thread that Mary talked about. They also need to help us know if even what we just said is the right thing. So I think in RFP, that's why this is really framed. The first bullet in the RFP is actually to help us make sure we got it right. And I do think that that's pretty common when you're talking about an RFP for this type of consultant work. So that's the only way I wanted to open it up, is to say, sure, we can say it's going to be at least 14. And I even say that, I say it's at least, but we also talked about it may make more sense for engagement sessions to be organized regionally. And so we really need someone to help us even define that part. So that's the only thing that I would offer up. Committee members, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I have nothing to add. I think you captured it well, Megan.
Thanks, Jeff. John?
Yep, I would concur. I really feel similar to what you expressed, Megan, that this is really getting somebody at the initial stage, right, to really guide us in this work. Again, I agree that we could probably put some numbers that, at least X number of, community forums, that kind of thing. But I do feel this is somewhat of an emergent enterprise. And I think we have to be open to somebody coming in saying, here's an option, here's another option, here's another option that we might not have even considered. And it was interesting when John was speaking earlier in the public comment, kind of the light bulb went off in my head that in terms of the scope of our work, I think we have been really thinking about the role that we play as a committee is to support the communication and engagement of the commission. But the reality is, I think there is a value in us helping local communities in their communication and engagement. And that really wasn't something that I had thought about, that part of our charge. But I think that's something that we should discuss and consider, is that, are we providing, for instance, creating meetings in a box, right? That those ideas that we have a consultant help us design so that school boards can further these conversations and have accurate information about the way tax rates are developed and information about school districts and everything. So I do feel, as you said, Megan, that this has to be somewhat a little bit open-ended at this point, because we want to make sure somebody's giving us good advice right from the beginning.
Yeah, thanks, John. I also was thinking the extent to which the commission can inform local districts in what they might need to think about communication wise. We probably can't take on that enormous lift, but I think it is relevant. And Zoe, I was looking at sort of the draft, and again, I say draft, but it was just a way for us to capture things. It may not be the right format, but scope of work, what I'm trying to figure out is what additional detail could we add that would generate robust proposals, but also leave it open-ended. So we have the first body of work is design and refine I wrote plan, but we had agreed to switch to framework. So help us refine that. So the consultant would work with the subcommittee as well as the full commission to review the existing framework, make appropriate changes. This would include the development of a more detailed scope of work. We can change that a little bit. I kind of understand in the world of pure procurement, we define the scope of work, not a consultant. I think that there's ways to refine that. We did put in here survey design because that was actually something we felt pretty strongly about, is that whatever method, and we think it's probably some kind of survey, for those who can't attend meetings, we wanted that to be really thoughtfully designed. What we could do, this bullet on facilitation, the consultant would lead and facilitate activities defined in the plan. We can probably make that a little bit more concrete. As I said, I think we're looking at, we could say, between 10 and 15 community input sessions. It could include focus groups. I mean, even within the framework, we acknowledge that some of our stakeholders, the way to engage them lends themselves to focus groups. Again, this is all going to be amended by them. But I do think that in this document, we could flesh that out a little bit. We had written training materials, which is kind of like the meeting in the box that John had talked about. I also am thinking about the conversation of the full commission last week, where it was clear that it might not be a good idea to have commission members rotate each month and write something for the media, and instead the consultant might help us do that. So we probably need a bullet here about generating media releases, essentially, and kind of to the community members' comment, that is part of how we so I'm going to stop talking, but that's how I do think there's places we could flesh it out. I'm curious what your thoughts are, Zoe.
I think it would be helpful to spend some time thinking about the phases a little bit more concretely in terms of understanding what the deliverables are for each phase and creating a little bit more of a concrete timeline. I think one of the things that is challenging, and I voiced at the commission meeting, is a lot of this work around engaging communication also needs to dovetail with content expertise. So when we're really engaging the community, it's going to be important to bring in data and information, to bring in ideas around what are strategies to from an education policy perspective that would be supportive of the work. So I think it's a little bit challenging to only look at this consultant work in the frame of just communication, just for communication's sake, because I think we really need to be intentional about, as a commission, around what we're communicating, what information we want to receive, and being clear on what subject matter expertise and content expertise might be valuable to engaging in that discussion. So I just put that out there because I do think it's going to be something that the commission is going to have to navigate as we move forward in making sure that our communication is organized in a way that's very intentional. I also think what I'm hearing too from the equity lens is really being concrete on how this can be organized as grassroots as possible. And in that work, I think being able to clearly articulate what does that mean from this committee's perspective, and how, as a member of the public had mentioned, how can we best leverage the expertise and the influence and connections that local organizations have, right? And so being intentional around that being part of a strategy, if that's what we desire, I think would be helpful. So I just share that because I from what I'm gathering, it's very broad, and I can ask Shelley to kind of weigh in terms of how we structure that. Certainly there would be, from a cost perspective, just an estimated cost of how a consultant might engage in any specific facet of this work, and within their proposal, they could build in examples of what they think would make the most sense based on what the scope has been defined to be. And then we may need to have some openness and flexibility to amendments throughout the process as we're getting clearer and more finite around what the scope of work may need to be, as this is kind of initially organized to be a little bit more organic in nature. So I just shared that as some additional framing, but I think Shelley might be able to provide us with some concrete guidance as we're thinking about this work really being designed to be adaptive and to evolve as we learn more. Shelley, do you have any specific guidance on that?
Well, before you jump to that, Shelley, I just want to be clear. That is everything you've just shared, Zoe, is exactly why this committee is recommending a consultant. And I just also think it's important. The commission has determined that communication and engagement consultation is required. I think they've been pretty clear about why, and it touched on many of the things. The agency is the vehicle for procurement, but it's not the agency's role to define what is needed. It's the agency's job to help us make sure we format it properly. I think all of us are pretty familiar with RFP processes. Certainly, a government agency has a certain format, and we're happy to comply with that, and certainly deadlines and things like that. But you talked a little bit about the ability to gather data, and this is someone who's. This is why at the commission, it was really clear, this is disconnected from, of course, I shouldn't use the word disconnected, I suppose, because of course it's connected. Their job would be to help engage, take data, bring it back to the community. And the grassroots part, that's why we need an expert. And that's why someone with an equity lens is part of what we need. So I just want to be clear, we just need to, I'm a little worried about a slowing of the process. I really think it's important to say we need to put an RFP out. I think it's been really clear from the public and from members of the commission that we have to get this right, and slowing it down makes me a little nervous. So happy to hear, Shelley, about timelines, formatting. I think there's some specificity we can increase here, but I'm a little worried about slowing down the process.
Yeah, and certainly my intent is not to slow down the process. I think it's just making sure that we on our end can collect the level of specificity that is ready at this time to get the quality bids to move forward. I think that's the intent of this conversation. And I do think there is some conversation around scope, right? Because ultimately there is a budget decision at some point around how much would be allocated towards this versus additional consulting expertise that may be needed down the road. So that'll just be part of kind of the overall conversation, I think probably at the commission level around from the budget aspect. And so some of how we develop that scope of work naturally has those conversations, right, around budget, because we only have a certain level of appropriation. But I think Shelley can kind of at this point walk us through like the timeline and really how to structure the scope of work at this point based on kind of how we're looking for this to be in many ways evolving as we learn more. So Shelley, can you give us some guidance on that?
Sure, Zoe. So the RFP process really is an internal agency process and the committee, so it doesn't require any outside approvals. So depending on when a draft came my way, and I would say review draft, review bids, you could look at a 4 to 6 week process for that. And then the depending on the dollar amount of the contract, that's what takes longer is the contract review and approvals. That could take another 4 to 6 weeks. But the RFP can be open-ended and with, asking the bidders to provide more guidance on what they can provide rather than specificity in the RFP. But the contract is where you need that specific work. That can't be open-ended unless, you would be looking at amendments to make those changes, as Zoe said.
That's helpful, Shelley. One question, and you might not have seen it. I don't know that you would have, but the commission viewed a draft, and again, drafts just is the concepts, components of an RFP. I didn't know if you had a chance to look at that, because I think that by the end of this meeting, we would be able to float to you, or maybe Zoe to you through, and then you forward it to Shelley. But we have a framework for an RFP, or is there a template that you would want to give us? I guess the point I'm trying to make is I think we could turn at least a draft around pretty quickly. And then I don't know if you would be the one to tell us like, hey, it's missing these components.
There is a template that I have. There's a lot of state requirements, state procurement requirements for RFPs that need to be included. So I can certainly share that.
That would be
And Shelley,
great, because then we could merge the two.
Yeah, and Shelley, in the calendar invite, there is the draft of the scope of work, so we can include that and just see if there's any specific details that you feel like we would need to incorporate within the content section of the RFP. And then I do need to jump off. I wanted the committee to also think about kind of how the procurement process works in terms of the review committee and how that would be structured. And then I think from what I'm hearing from Shelley is that the open-ended is probably going to be fine in order for us to move forward in accelerating this first phase of the timeline. When we get to contract negotiation, that will be more time when we need to think with the commission too around the budgeting aspect and those more specificity. So that gives us a little time, right, walking through this to get concrete around that aspect when everyone's ready to make those decisions.
Yeah, I was trying to actually scroll through because I had a number in my head that I thought had been, and that's not to say that that number would be for this group, but, and I don't want to say the number because I don't want to misspeak. Do you know it off the top of your head, Zoe?
For what was appropriated in total amount?
Yes.
I believe it was around 200,000, but if maybe
Okay.
Maureen, if you could help us to confirm that before the end of the meeting.
Yeah, I'm looking for it. I'll try and get
Thank
back
you
to
very
you on that.
much. And I
Yeah,
do need
that
to
was-
jump off, but I appreciate Shelley being here to go through all the technical aspects. Thank you, Shelley.
Thanks, Zoe. Yeah, that was the number that was in my head. I was just afraid to, and the only reason I point that out is, my sense is that that appropriation is healthy enough to get us a communication and engagement consultant as well as potential other work that other subcommittees may have. And I don't, so maybe what we do as a communication committee is just affirm connecting with the probably finance subcommittee, because I think that's the other group that would look at it. I don't know that it was a universal thought on behalf of the finance committee that they needed that level of support. I think they were just desiring to hold to that out there in case they need it. So, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is that 200,000? I got to go back. Does anybody recall whether that's the entirety of the appropriation for the entire commission, including our subgroup, or is that just for comms?
That's what it would, whatever the appropriation is. I don't know whether or not it also covers like the mileage reimbursement and the per
Right.
diems, or if that's a standalone amount for consultants.
Got it. Okay.
So I'm not sure.
Try to dig up the law.
The way the language is in the actual law is $200,000 general fund in fiscal year 2024 to the Agency of Education for the work of the school. Oh, that's the school construction. Sorry, I thought I'm pretty sure it's all of our costs. So if I remember correctly.
That's what I thought. And it's not, I mean, and Zoe has said this, and she didn't say it today, but she said it in past meetings. It doesn't mean that the commission can't make that as a recommendation to, a future recommendation. I think the goal is to try to get this rolling. And I would just echo what others have said. This part we really need to get right, because it's not just about communication and getting the information out and informing the public, although that is a really important part of it. It's also about bringing voices and perspectives into the conversation. And we have both of those in this outline. So let's see. Shelley, I lost you on my screen. Oh, maybe Shelley also stepped off with Zoe. Yep, I think so. So I guess then here's the takeaways I heard from the draft that we have, and that is to put a little bit more specificity around a global number of engagement sessions, because I think we could put a range. I was going to add a line on, we actually want the consultant to help us write media releases on a regular basis. Was there anything else that we should add either from today or from last week's commission meeting?
I would love to see the draft one more time.
Okay.
But I don't disagree with anything you said so far.
Okay. So go ahead, John.
Yeah, I was just gonna, back to that idea, is there any value in us including developing resources for school districts to utilize?
Oh, yeah.
Again, not that we're the ones doing all of that work or that this consultant is working for, but it's this kind of meeting in a box concept, but helping to design communication that can be generalized and utilized across the state. I think, some of that exists already, but, the VSBA has some of that information, the Joint Fiscal Office has some of that information, but I think some of that, from my experience, tends to be very difficult for people to understand. It's a little too opaque and a little bit too dense. So it's being able to look at those existing tools and helping to provide some guidance around communicating, how do we generate tax rates and things like that and spending across the state.
Yeah, I think we can flesh out the, some of these were in the framework, but not the RFP. We had that idea of a toolkit in there. So I think I can merge that together. I think we're going to have to wrestle with tension between this commission's job is to communicate out and get input in to be able to make its recommendations. Obviously, we've got this parallel, really challenging budget season again, and would like to offer support and probably can offer support to locals because of the extent to which the commission will have an understanding of the issues. But again, like you said, we're not gonna be able to do it all. So I think we can add those three things. I can send that back out to this committee. Maybe if I could get your feedback by Friday, then I can have it to Shelley by Friday, and then it speeds up that process. Does that work? Okay. So the next thing I had on the agenda, I actually should make sure this matches. I had a slightly different version of the agenda in my notes. I had written to talk a little bit about the October commission meeting, because we will rotate location. Suzanne and Maureen are working on that. The question is whether or not we want to hold an input session once we start moving out of our location, knowing that we won't have a consultant by then to help us facilitate and design that session. And whether or not we as a communication committee want to design a version of that, or whether we think it's more prudent to wait until, what do folks think?
Here's my concern about waiting. I would normally say we should wait and have a consultant there. My concern is we're talking in October, budget season's already kicking off. There's going to be people that are going to be asking for short-term solutions in December. I know that's not totally our responsibility, although we're supposed to help in that realm. I think the time it may take to get a consultant aboard, from what I heard, it could be 3 months or something before we have somebody on board. I don't think we can afford to wait, much as I don't want us to have to, do this on our own. I think we still need to start and maybe be conscious of if we don't get the feedback we think we need or enough information for those first two community meetings, maybe we go back into those two communities later, wherever that happens to be. And do we have an idea on when or where the October one is going to be yet?
I don't, Maureen, you're welcome to weigh in, but I don't want to put you on the spot. I know that you are working on it and you have some ideas, but I don't know how firm they are yet.
Yeah, I don't want you on the spot.
Appreciate that. We don't know just yet. No.
Okay.
Thank you.
That's fine. Thanks. All right. That's my 2 cents, folks.
I guess I'll chime in. I agree as well that we're kind of stuck in a tough spot, right? If we wait and say, okay, we need to bring on an expert and be prepared before we engage the public, we're going to be better at that process. At the same token, I think we really risk the perception of the public that we're stonewalling, right? That we're not willing to start the process. I also think if we're starting to move these meetings around, what is the chance we are going to come back to a, if let's say, for instance, you're meeting in Orleans County in October, are we going to come back to Orleans County, 6 months from now and just say, well, we didn't have the chance to meet when we had our commission meeting there. So I understand there's probably some reservations about us designing something. I think we would have to be very clear with the public that, this is our trial run, right? This is a pilot in our process. But I do think if we keep something very focused and succinct around our listening, I think that being the priority. I also worry from a timing standpoint, what information are we bringing to the public? And I actually wanted to have this conversation with Zoe on the call, and I apologize. I'm certainly happy to speak with Zoe directly, but I'm not comfortable with utilizing the agency's information that is being utilized right now for the current work that the agency is doing. I feel, very strongly we need to have our information. Now, there may be components of that information that I think are ready, but I think there's some parts of that information that I actually find very problematic. And so I just think that's another piece of this. What are we going to be prepared in terms of putting information out in addition to listening?
That's exactly what I was going to say, John. I'm going to chime in, Megan. What information do we come to these meetings with that we share out, as you say? And I think that is going to be critical, because if we don't have information, we're going to get eaten up, I think, by public who are angry about the system, I'll just say at large. And we need to have some good, rock solid information that's accurate, that we can share out with people when we meet with them. I'm worried, Shelley laid out the AOE timeline of 8 to 24 weeks. I share your concern, Jay. Like, we've got to, that's too long. We've got to be seen as doing, hearing from people, engaging with people, and not be crawling back into our shell and just amongst ourselves. I think you alluded to that, John. So October 7th seems really fast. I will say that. It's less than a month away, obviously. But maybe we try to do it and do the best we can. And I don't know who, John or Jay, said a pilot program. Okay. We're gonna get better at this, I'm sure. Start someplace. It'll start off ugly, perhaps.
Jay?
Yeah, to that end, I think we want to be really clear at the beginning of that meeting that, listen, folks, we're just starting this process. We're gathering information. More information will come in. There'll be specific proposals that we imagine will be recommended that we will share with the public. You're going to have other opportunities to weigh in through like a survey and things like that as well. And because we're in the very infancy of this process, our main focus here tonight or this afternoon or whatever time we do this is to get input from community. And we're going to be taking copious notes. The most important part of this, yes, we want to bring information to you. We want to have things that you can react to once we get to the point where we're making recommendations, you being the public at large. But at the same time, for this first meeting, we really want to listen and learn and hear what concerns people have in this region, and approach it more from that lens. We may have some recommendations by October 7th, but I don't see that happening.
Hearing all of that, and I agree. I also would say we don't have to overly apologize for whatever version we're able to do on the 7th, right? Like, we're
Sure.
Here's a connection that I'm making, and I wonder if this would suffice. I agree about being really careful with what data we share, because we're in the process of defining what data we need. We don't have it all yet. So what we do know, though, is actually some of the stuff that was shared at our July meeting. We know the charge of the commission, the makeup of the commission, what its responsibility is. We now know how we've decided to chunk out the work. We know what we've all agreed as a communication. So what we can do as the informing part in October is inform up to what we have. And what we have is, I think, good work on how to do the work. And I think there's some places that we can inform the complexity. I think that's an important theme. We're not, I don't know that it's an opportunity for us to show data that is not yet complete, but it is an acknowledgement that all of that data is going to need to be part of this decision. I think we have to lean in on our 2 timelines and how quick that 1st December timeline is. I think it's important for the public to know that. So in other words, I think there's a fair amount that we can share without trying to share things that's not solid yet, or data that's really helpful, but perhaps incomplete or gathered for a different purpose. Like, I think that if we were to do it that way, and then have a pretty simple input opportunity with some, guiding questions, that's a pretty reasonable thing to do in October at this stage of the work, because we're not trying to go, and then the next one will have a little bit more probably, and the next one will have a little bit more. And that's why once the consultant is helping us, they'll have to say, okay, where are you? Where have you been and what have you done? And then they might help us design a way to go back through. So I don't think we have to worry that much about that part. That also would be relatively simple, I think, to pull off. And we as an engagement committee could probably co-facilitate through something like that. I don't know. What do folks think?
Sounds reasonable to me.
Megan, I think you captured some really important points. It just, part of this is informing the public about our work, right? How is the commission going to operate? What have we done already? So I think that's great. I also think, as you said, we can identify the complexity, and even just explaining this tension that exists between spending and decision making at the local level versus decisions that are made at the state level. I think just giving people that understanding that we as a commission understand this tension, we understand the challenge of how do we come to some partnership, some agreement where decisions are made locally versus decisions are made at the state level. So I do think there's a lot of information there, right? And we have to be careful. We also don't want to barrage people. We don't want to give them an hour-long PowerPoint, with lots of figures and lots of charts and all of that stuff, because we'll lose people, and it'll be perceived as we're trying to bury them, right? And trying to obfuscate things. So I really appreciated the way you articulated that. I think we can share where we are as a commission, the complexity of the work, and put that body of information together, and then really focus on listening. And I don't think it takes more than a couple of prompts, right, to ask the public. It could be a prompt about local spending and a prompt about state, spending and allocations, or something that simple. And I think ultimately the most important thing, even if this is a little messy, is that it has to be authentic, and I think, even though we could get, some pushback and we can get some people that are unhappy about the way things are in the state, I think if we approach this in a very authentic way, that we're doing the best we can to quickly turn around a process to bring you information and listen to you, I think we will have good support from the public.
Thanks, John. I'm probably going to ask the question that's going to cause everyone to keep their mics off, which is, does anyone want to volunteer to just put an outline together of, some of which we just talked about, we'll be able to pull it from the notes. Here's what we're going to share. Here's 2 or 3 questions. And then, frankly, we would tailor how we structure the event based a little bit on where we are, right? Because we may end up with a lot of people or very few people. That also reminds me, as quickly as we know the location, we need to advertise in that area. So, yeah, this will be a pilot, so to speak, but does anyone want to make an outline? I should bring it back to the question. Does anybody want to volunteer to share an outline with this committee? Maybe we each put one of us to facilitate a different part of it.
I nominate Oliver.
Well
No,
done. Well played, John.
Yeah, just like town meeting, and you don't show up, you get nominated for certain things. I'd be willing to take a shot at it.
Okay.
I'd be happy to do that. And
John,
and
if you,
maybe,
I was going to say, I would collaborate with you if you wanted to, but I would love for you to take a first draft. You spoke
Okay.
you spoke well a few minutes ago. Got distracted with a phone call I had to take. But I would, yeah.
I'm happy to give it a shot, understanding that this is a team effort, right? And sometimes it's just easier to have something to respond to, and you won't hurt my feelings if you know things are rejected. That's okay. But you know, sometimes you just got to get the ball moving and put it together. So I'm happy to give a shot at that. I won't be able to get it done today. I'm on a deadline to get a grant in, but I can work on it tomorrow for sure. And get it done tomorrow by midday, so that you know we want to get it out. So I know we wanted to turn some things around, but happy to give that a shot.
Thank you, John and Jeff. That's great. I think we can just amongst ourselves do that pretty quickly. Do we want to logistically, even if it's a brief meeting, we would normally meet on the third Monday in October, which is after the 7th. Do we want to try to meet, even if it's just briefly, or do we want to agree to show up at the commission meeting site 45 minutes early so that I don't know how much time we feel like we'll need. I think the outline we can make sense of. If there's slides, not a lot of slides, but I am just thinking about the slides that's, you know, charge of the committee members, just really simple, which I don't mind pulling together because I have access. I think it's just merging a few different things. So do we want to meet in the next couple of weeks before the 7th? Do we want to try?
I think it would be helpful. I'd feel
ideal.
better.
Okay.
Yeah, me too. If we can find a time that works.
Same. Okay. I don't see you for a second because I'm looking at my calendar. We have 2 Mondays if we wanted to stick to Mondays. We could meet the 23rd or the 30th. We're not tied to Mondays. I'm just starting with that.
I can't do either one, and
Okay.
some of us will be at the governor's safety thing, and others will be there too. So there's a thing on the 30th that.
Okay. So is there another day of the week that loosely works for folks?
How about the 4th, Friday the 4th?
I will
Wide
not
open.
be available Friday the 4th, but if I'm the only one,
Let's try to get one where we can get at least the 4 of us there, and hopefully Oliver can.
Yeah.
Since he's not here, we don't have his calendar.
I could do Wednesday the 2nd in the morning. I could do the week before, but that doesn't give us as much time to prep.
Wednesday the 2nd, I've got a important meeting at 10 o'clock with a bunch of the people at the health department around the cell phones in schools. I could do earlier.
Can we do
I
like
could do. Yeah, go ahead, John.
8 o'clock on that Wednesday the 2nd?
Yep.
I get a very hard stop at 9, but 8:55 really.
That might be okay if we're really just putting our heads together, dividing up who's doing what. So do we want to say Wednesday the 2nd at 8 o'clock?
Yeah.
Great. So
Sounds
Maureen, if you don't mind sending us an agenda or a invite after the fact, and the agenda will just be commission input session for October 7th. I think it's just a one agenda item. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Those were the 2 priority things. And before opening up to public comment, I'm now confirming that our next meeting is the 2nd at 8. And then I think that we didn't repeat the invite for the 3rd Monday of the month at 8 o'clock, but I'm assuming we can have Maureen repeat that invite. If we change it on a given month, that's fine. Okay.
Megan,
Great.
before we move on, can I just two things. One, I think we ought to have some conversation about how are we getting the word out, right? Are we assuming that the AOE staff is, going to be able to push all of this information out via different, media sources and local school districts? But I think we want to make sure, again, the broadcasting of the fact that we are holding a forum, I think is important. And I think, we don't necessarily need to talk more about it today, but maybe not necessarily the second if we're focused on the forum, but maybe our next meeting in October, I'd really like to dig in a little bit more about what is the data and information that the commission will be utilizing. Now, some of that would be data and information we present at public forums, but some of it may be data that we are putting on our website, right? That this is data that we're using to inform the work of the commission. And I'm not looking to, be difficult about this, but I do think if we were to sit down with Zoe, maybe at one of those meetings, there are a number of, again, issues that I have with the current data, the data that was presented to us originally that I know has been refined somewhat, but is being used for the AOE's listening and discussion sessions across the state. So I just want to make sure the data that we are using, the commission has made a decision. It's not just that, okay, well, this is convenient, so we'll just piggyback the data that the agency has.
Yeah, I appreciate that. There's a couple of folks who brought up the question of data in general. The steering group meets today for agenda planning for the 7th, and I think that that's also an agenda item for the full commission. Obviously, we have the lens of needing it for purposes of communication and engagement. It's also relevant to the full commission. Jeff, you had mentioned the construction funding and kind of where that is, capital, all of that. So I think it's safe to say that that'll be a pretty solid agenda item for the full commission on the 7th. And then whatever else has to follow from there. It also just occurred to me, we should at least pencil a time for this forum, because as soon as, I think the short answer to the who's going to push it out question, I'm sure the agency has a press release that goes to the various media outlets. And even if it's just a quick paragraph, you're invited to. So if our commission meets from 1 to 4, there's not going to be any perfect time, but I do wonder about a 5 o'clock. I would say that for this first one, I don't know that we want to make it 6 or 7 because that's a big gap in between. So do we want to say 5? Do we want to say late, like 4:30? So make it closer to it. And then maybe people do that before they head home for dinner. What's the pleasure? I think we just need to pick one and fix it next time.
I agree with you earlier, the 4:30 range.
4:30.
And are we saying, like, is it a 2-hour thing, a 3-hour thing?
I mean, I think my sense is the first one would be shorter, 90 minutes, 60 to 90 minutes. And that's not to say that we wouldn't keep going. If people are still engaging, we'll keep going, but we bookmark it because there's not that much to share in the beginning, longer time for listening. And then the end time is somewhat flexible. I do think we'd have to publish an end time, but.
Yeah.
I would maybe, and I certainly understanding that we may all be traveling right to another location. I worry a little bit about a 4:30 start. I mean, just the turnaround time, of ending our meeting, and depending on the location, are we meeting in the same place as the public meeting? That may, maybe the same building, but just a different room, that kind of thing. But I would maybe encourage us to consider, say, like a 5 to 7:30. And I also, partly out of deference for folks, some folks can get out of work a little early, but 5 o'clock may be a little bit more accommodating to the public. So gives us a little time to debrief, transition, have a snack, whatever it may be, go for a 10-minute walk, and then be prepared for 5 o'clock. I just, to go right from 4 o'clock ending to 4:30 just might, even just the technical setup, where are we, getting the mic set, the somebody, I guess an advanced team will be doing some of that stuff for us. But anyway, I would just encourage maybe a 5 o'clock start.
5 o'clock work? Knowing that we'll ask for feedback about all the things and they might say, we'd rather have a 7 o'clock meeting, and that's fine. I think ease of making it happen for this first one is probably good. So what we'll do, and I'll follow up after the fact, is we'll bookmark 5 to 7-ish. Once we have a little blurb, once we have the location, that's the next, once we have a location, then we'll be able to push out just a quick invite. We'll push it out through their media channels also to the commission, and then every commission member should be pushing it out to your circles. We all know that that's imperfect, but it's, you know, it's probably reasonably broad. I think that's the thing I wanted to make sure we did, is just bookmark the time. All right. I realize we're getting to the end, but thank you for those members of the public who've been part of the conversation. Does anyone want to share any comments before we close? I'm going to give a second to see some hands. I see 2. I just want to, that'll help me know how long we have. All right, well, we'll start with Mary and then John. Mary, I saw your hand first.
Thanks, Megan. In the spirit of supporting this work through an equity lens, I might be throwing a bit of a difficult point into this conversation about the date for this first community gathering, or I'm not sure what you're calling it exactly. October 7th will be the 1-year anniversary of the commemoration of the attack on Israel. And so I have 2 thoughts. One is, I think it would bode well for this committee to rethink the date in the spirit of inclusion, and also in the spirit of recognizing that that has impacted our state as well, and certainly people in the community. Secondly, there are many community events happening on that day that will be commemorating this event. And that may keep people from coming to this really important conversation as well. So I just wanted to make sure that that's on people's radar screens, but also on your minds and hearts.
Thank you, Mary. John?
Can you hear me okay? Yeah, I just wanted to add a little bit to my earlier comments, and I guess I'm sorry, I didn't realize, I guess, that communication, your subcommittee was more concerned with what your commission was doing and not at the statewide local level. But I certainly agree that what you do for your commission, you may be able to filter down to the local level. Now, I attended all the virtual town halls conducted by our local school board leading up to the budget vote, and also the local school board meetings online. And I took pretty good notes and followed the process and the discussion. Now, when it led up to the actual presentation prior to the budget vote, now understand that my only experience to briefings was as a staff officer in the Army, when I would go to command and general staff briefings. And obviously, when I got to the briefing point at the school board, you can imagine I was pretty disappointed. There was, rather, brushed, glossy, effort to kind of go over information that was already readily available in graphs at the school board website. And there was nothing new, no effort made really to provide an education leading up to understanding what your vote would ultimately mean in terms of your pocketbook when you circled in that oval. So I was just requesting, and I think the commission could help greatly in filtering down some information about how they could better provide a presentation in a format that people can understand and provide some valuable information. So that's my only comment. And I thank you again for my time.
Thanks, John. Thanks, folks. We are at 9. I did want to just point out, I know we normally aren't prepped to respond. We have a steering group meeting today, and the purpose is to agenda plan. And Mary, I would just say we are, or I'm certainly aware, it's already on my radar to talk with the steering group about the pros and cons of holding the meeting and not. So on October 7th. So I just wanted to say that. Seeing no other hands, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Thank you. And Jeff, I'm going to assume you're a second.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
folks.